Vernon Johns was a legend who would influence future legends. While his grandfather was hanged for chopping his slave master in half, Vernon Johns would also be a man to challenge injustice. He chose to become a preacher and was so gifted in memorization that he could quote whole books of the Bible from memory. He challenged segregation at a time when few did. He was known to have ordered food at whites-only restaurants, and when kicked off of a bus for sitting in the white section, he demanded his fare and actually got it back, an unprecedented accomplishment at the time. During the 1920s, the top preachers of the day would have their sermons published in a prestigious international publication known as Best Sermons. It troubled Reverend Johns that every single year, sermons by the most brilliant black preachers were ignored. So he sent one of his own sermons. His became the first sermon by a black minister published in this 1926 edition of Best Sermons. Well, during his time pastoring a church in Montgomery, Alabama in the late 1940s, Reverend Johns installed a large marquee in front of the church facing the street and put the titles of his provocative sermons for all to see. These actions horrified his conservative congregation and on occasion caused him to be called into the police station by the suspicious police chief. One sermon title that made it onto the large marquee was titled, "It is Safe to Murder Negroes in Montgomery." That action caused the Ku Klux Klan to burn a cross on the church lawn that Saturday night. Reverend Johns' consistent fight against complacency and injustice made an impact. And 14 years before his death, his niece, Barbara Johns, protested substandard conditions at her segregated school, and her lawsuit ended up being part of the landmark 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision declaring segregation in schools unconstitutional. His church eventually forced Reverend Johns to resign. The church leadership could not wait to hire a refined pastor who would stick to preaching and steer clear of controversial issues. So they hired a safe, 25-year-old preacher from out of town that they were convinced would bring no controversy. They hired Martin Luther King Jr. My name is Chris Prytower, and this is our story.